So hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. I'm just going to adjust this a little bit right here. Get that in a better position. It's better. Not perfect, but better. So hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the post-debate analysis for the Democratic Party debate, which was on CBS. If you didn't catch it, it was on their YouTube channel. I assume that at least for a little bit, it'll be available for reviewing. You can probably catch it after this stream if you need to see that. Great to have you all here. 75 or so people here right now. It's fantastic to see. I've been watching the chat a little bit go on behind the scenes. It's always great to see that. We're certainly going to be taking tons of questions. That usually forms the bulk of these sorts of streams. We'll be talking about whatever you guys want to talk about pertaining to the debate and how you feel the debate may or may not affect, Super Tuesday, the South Carolina primary, the broader race, and so on and so forth. I just want to say a few words before then, and then I'll kind of get into questions. I do these streams fairly regularly. I stream after pretty much every debate, and I also stream every Wednesday night from about 8:30 Eastern for a couple of hours. So I'll still be doing that tomorrow. So we'll be talking about the fallout from the debate, plus other political news from Canada and the United States and abroad if you guys want to do that as well. But on this debate, objectively, this wasn't a great debate. The moderation wasn't very good. They've had lots of debates with 6, 7, 8 people on stage, and it really did seem like, they couldn't control the audience. They couldn't control the audience, right? It wasn't there. And because of that, it really did, from my perspective, limit anyone's effect. Like, even if you're not a Bernie person, or even if you're anybody else's person, I don't think anybody could really get clear thoughts across because there was so much interrupting and cross-talking and just people, trying to insert themselves in manners that wouldn't be tolerated in a better moderated debate. Got a couple super chats here. Again, when I read questions, I try to read as many as I can, but of course, I really appreciate super chats. They help the channel improve the growth and quality of the channel. Ryan says, I believe the audience was stacked for Bloomberg, paid to cheer him on and boo Sanders. What do you think? Okay, on that, Ryan, I'm going to move to this point. I can't say the audience was necessarily bought and paid for by any particular person. I don't have evidence of that. So maybe, but what I do know, and I read this from multiple sources on Twitter and some articles were covering it, that I believe the price for tickets in this particular debate were no less than, say, $1,750. So basically, you had to pay at least $1,700, apparently as much as $3,200 to get into the room. And so it's no surprise that if most of the people in that room had to buy their tickets and drop, a huge sum of money for regular people, that the sort of people in the room are going to be less amenable than average of Bernie's plan, right? So you're more likely to have pro-Bloomberg, pro-Buttigieg, pro-Biden folks in a room that costs $1,700 to get into than in a room where, you just get tickets. You have to, everyone gets tickets, first come, first serve, and you get a more random sampling of the South Carolina population. So that's what I'll say there. And I will say that I agree with you that the audience seemed more hostile to Bernie and Warren even as well than they normally are. Bernie and Warren, again, we've been critical of Warren on this channel, but objectively, across all the polling we've seen, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are the most popular candidates in the field. They have very high favorability ratings. Not a lot of Democrats don't like them. And so at the end of the day, you can look at both of those candidates and say, in most rooms, most of the time, Bernie and Liz are going to be the kind of people that actually do quite well with audiences, right? And here tonight, they both got booed a lot in ways that I've never heard before. And so I definitely think that was the nature. I don't know if that was rigged against Bernie in any explicit manner, but certainly people who can afford $1,700 aren't Bernie's folks most of the time. Obi says Bernie didn't destroy it, but everyone looked like absolute clowns, so it won't stop him from running away with the race, IMO. Look, I agree. Bernie wasn't bad tonight. Bernie had some great moments tonight, but Bernie's had better debates. Like, if we went through each and every debate, spot by spot by spot, what we would see is that Bernie Sanders obviously had better debates. But when you're the front runner, somebody needs you need to mess up, or someone needs to take your crown. This is why Biden, for so goddamn long, led the primary process, despite the fact that he had some less than good debates. Let's put it that way. Some pretty bad ones, if I'm being honest. But, front runners' momentum is a real thing. And often it's like, as long as you don't mess up, and as long as no one wows everybody else, then you'll be fine, right? Like, that's how it goes. And I think tonight Bernie was good. Bernie gave some great answers. But Bernie, at times, I think could have done a better job. He could have prepared a soundbite style answer for the how are you going to pay for it question. I understand it's a complicated question. I get that. I 100% get that. But Bernie should have practiced a 30-second, 1-minute pitch. Here's how I'm going to pay for Medicare for all. And that's one thing he could have had. That soundbite could have been played over and over again. But ultimately, Bernie Sanders was the focus of attack all night, but especially in the first 20 minutes or so. And I don't think this endangered his frontrunner status. Lisa says, Twitch was brutal and banned the Surfs and Bad Bunny for commenting during the streaming of the debate. I saw that, Lisa. For those who don't know, the Surfs have a YouTube channel, but the Surfs and Bad Bunny are some, large pro-Bernie, pro-left Twitch streamers that often cover politics live as it happens, and they were covering it. At first, Lisa, what we assume happened and what they assumed happened was that CBS basically got their channels restricted, taken down because of this. But what ended up happening from what the Surf said just before I came on stream was that somebody was doing a false copyright claim against some of the larger left-wing channels covering the debate. Maybe they were just trying to troll. Maybe it was like, some Trumper who was going after pro-Bernie Sanders streaming channels. So I don't know exactly what happened. But in any case, it's really sad to see that sort of thing happen. It's one of the reasons people ask me, like, why don't we do live debate coverage? One, I feel it's better for me to watch the debate and actually soak it all in, then come to you guys. But another reason is that, I'm worried about getting my channel, be it here on YouTube or even on Twitch, getting copyright struck for covering a debate using the actual, live feed. Lulu says, I believe Bloomberg bought his seats and filled the room with his people. Look, we might find out that that's true. I know you and Ryan both sort of said that. At this stage, I can't, make that claim without some evidence. But again, as I noted, this very clearly was a room full of people that can afford tickets that sort of make them not Bernie's typical audience. And that's the reality before us, right? I'm just going to mute my phone here, guys. Sorry about that. So that's basically where we're at with that. So, in terms of the broader debate, some other interesting things. Warren tonight was really uneven again. There was some good... See, I thought Warren was going to take a different approach tonight. When she attacked Bernie in the beginning, she was doing it in a way that I thought was like the way respectful comrades and friends would attack one another. There's nothing wrong with Elizabeth Warren attacking Bernie Sanders. I disagree with it. Most of my viewers, most of the people in the chat, probably Bernie folks, we know that at the end of the day, Bernie's the better candidate. But there's nothing wrong with Elizabeth Warren making the case she can for why she wants to be president, when it's based on fact and not slander. And so, if you guys recall, Warren last week basically said that I want to be president because unlike Bernie, I'm not just going to yell and get nothing done. That was unfair. Tonight, Warren started really good where she said, I want to be president. I actually agree a lot with Bernie. Him and I share a similar vision, but I feel I would be a better president. That was fine. Like, that's basically what Bernie said about Liz Warren this entire time, which is that him and Liz agree on a lot, but those smaller differences are where I feel I'll be the better president, more transformative for working class people. And so Warren therefore went too far the other direction and basically attacked Bernie Sanders again, saying his plan isn't achievable, he's got nothing done. Then again with Warren, she was really strong at going after Bloomberg once more. And I thought, kudos to her for doing that. Biden tonight, when he wasn't complaining about the fact that everyone was talking too much or that he wasn't getting enough time to talk, even though he often cut himself short, Biden tonight wasn't particularly bad or good. Some people noted, Biden, Biden was Biden tonight, for better or for worse. Some of his attacks on Bernie were disingenuous. He was lying through his teeth when he basically said that Barack Obama never said what Bernie said about Cuba. As we recall, I've covered it on the channel. Lots of other people have said that, what Bernie Sanders said about Cuba, which is that, we condemn some of the aspects of the Cuban regime in terms of its approach to democracy and civil rights. Nonetheless, at the end of the day, they have done wonderful things given their economic disadvantages with healthcare and education and equity on gender and racial terms. And so we should applaud Cuba for that. And I think that's a perfectly nuanced approach. And Bernie and Obama both said that. And, everyone on the stage was basically lying by trying to attack Bernie there. I thought Biden more than most did that because he damn well knows what Barack Obama said, because Barack Obama was vice president at the time. Pete Buttigieg is a rat. Pete Buttigieg is an absolute rat. I might hate Pete Buttigieg more. Okay, if I had to rank, and maybe you guys agree, list of people I hate, it goes like Buttigieg, it goes Bloomberg, then just a little bit below Bloomberg, Buttigieg, and then everyone else is way down here. Everyone else is way down here. That's my viewpoint. Samantha Sider, thank you so much for joining the channel and becoming a member. For those who are maybe longer time viewers of the channel, one thing that we have on this channel relatively recently added is the ability to become a member. So you can do that, and it allows you to support the channel on an ongoing monthly basis through a kind of small monthly fee. I'll add your name to my end card and other perks depending on the level of support. It's a great way to support the channel on a little bit by little bit basis. But yeah, Buttigieg is a rat. Buttigieg is an absolute rat, and lying today, trying to attack Bernie Sanders Medicare by spreading lies about it, taking questions that had nothing to do with Bernie or Medicare. One of the last questions was about foreign policy, and he's like, well, you know what is like this Bernie Sanders dangerous healthcare plan and blah, 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 blah. Just absolute desperation from Pete the Rat. It was inexcusable, Pete's conduct, and it wasn't even effective. And Pete, more than anybody else in this debate, I think was interrupting people, was lying, was misinforming folks, was trying to excuse his own campaign shortcomings. Yeah, it was awful. Pete Buttigieg is awful. With regard to Klobuchar, I mean, she's basically a non-factor. Tom Steyer, the better billionaire of the two, has still kind of went after Bernie in a disingenuous manner. What was very interesting, I thought, in this debate, which you guys might have noticed, is that Joe Biden, at least once or twice, took initiative to actually attack Tom Steyer. And you might say, why is Joe Biden going after the guy who's probably polling the lowest nationally on the stage, with maybe the exception of Klobuchar? And the reason is that in South Carolina, Bernie Sanders and him are kind of in a relatively close 1-2 race. But Steyer's got a lot of support in South Carolina, at least according to polling. And so Biden likely feels he can take some support there. So tonight, you still saw some of those attacks. Bloomberg wasn't as bad as in the last debate. But that bar is microscopically, nanoscopically close to the ground. He wasn't attacked as much, and so he wasn't as bad in this debate, but his answers were more or less terrible. He still comes off as cocky. I know to be a billionaire and succeed in politics, you have to sometimes lean into this sort of cockiness. But like, unlike Trump, he doesn't make it relatable in any meaningful way. So on the whole, who noted it here? Obi noted, Bernie didn't have his best debate, but nobody was so consistently good that they could really chip into things. Unless I'm misreading it, I don't think there's going to be significant movement after this poll in any meaningful way. I think things are going to be largely status quo. A says, amazing when the Bernie stated the U.S. coups. I think you're 100% right, Ace. And that's what's great about Bernie. Look, if I made my video about Bernie and Cuba and the fake controversy, and what I said was, if anything, Bernie didn't praise Cuba enough, because while I'm not necessarily a fan of the state of civil rights in Cuba today, you know, Cuba, compared to its neighbors, in many ways is a better society to live in. And the only reason Cuba is not a better society than it is because of generations, literally more than half a century of American pressure, economic, diplomatic, military, cultural pressure on Cuba in a way that they have not done to any other country so consistently and so thoroughly. And so, you know, Cuba, the success Cuba's had is, if anything, downplayed by the American superpower putting so much pressure on it. But what I said about Bernie, and I think it applied tonight, is that Bernie Sanders will give a fair shake in foreign policy. I might not always agree with them, but he is going to be a fair-minded player. He will criticize, left-wing, quote-unquote, left-wing dictatorships. He will praise them too. Bernie Sanders will offer praise and criticism to countries around the world, whether or not it's convenient for the corporate interests of America. That's what makes Bernie Sanders something of a special character, right? Bernie Sanders will say that Cuba has done good things, but that he does not agree with some of the political structures in Cuba. But unlike everyone else on the stage, like A's noted, Bernie will call out Saudi Arabia consistently. He will call out the right-wing leadership in Israel. He will call out, American-backed coups, historic and contemporary, in Latin and Central America. And so Bernie's going to be a fair player, right? And I think that's what was so unique. I mean, I know other smaller, I know Tulsi Gabbard has sometimes said some of these things, although with regard to some other countries in the world, I don't think she's as consistently good as Bernie. But of all the main candidates, who else is acknowledging that the United States has often been a force against democracy, not for it, across the world? Only Bernie Sanders. That doesn't mean he'll be perfect, but it means that when you have him in the White House, this is a man that's going to think damn hard about the effects of American foreign policy. Karen Sita, thank you so much for your joining of the channel. I really appreciate that. Great to have you aboard as a member of the channel. A longtime viewer, much like Samantha, and it's great to have you guys aboard in this capacity. Thank you so much. So, I mean, all in all, I don't know what the effects of this debate are going to be. If we look to South Carolina right now in South Carolina, the polling averages are pretty decent for Biden. unfortunately. One poll came out that had Biden winning by more than 10, but that's not likely accurate. Biden is, the other polls have Biden either tied with Bernie or up by a couple points. And so you average that out, Biden's likely leading by about 5 over Bernie. Not an insurmountable margin for Bernie. Tom Steyer's in third, but a distant third, and no one else is even competitive. So the question is, in this debate, did anything happen that could fundamentally change the division of powers between those three? Maybe you could say that Joe Biden landed something of a blow on Tom Steyer, bringing up his investment in private prisons. I don't think that's a bad claim to make. Whether you believe Biden actually gives a damn or if he's just trying to score points, I mean, Tom Steyer's investments in private prisons is very troubling. Is very, very troubling. To me, as a Canadian, and I'm not the sort of Canadian that gloats about Canada relative to you guys. I don't. I've been often critical of that Canadian smugness. But if there's one thing besides the fact that you guys don't have universal health care that scares me, it's your private prisons. It's the for-profit prison system. And anybody who seeks to profit from that knowingly, directly, is incredibly, incredibly problematic to me. That's just the reality, right? So, in a sense, what we have to kind of look at is, will that cause any major movement? I'm not sure. So, from my perspective, if we get some South Carolina polling tomorrow or the next day, my inkling is there's not going to be a whole lot of movement. I don't think that Bernie did anything so great tonight that he's going to win over a bunch of people in South Carolina. And I don't think Biden necessarily did anything so great to either expand his lead, nor was he a disaster tonight that he's going to lose his lead. So I think that going into South Carolina, you're going to see things be pretty stable. Bernie's got a shot, but it's Bernie might not win South Carolina. And I think it's important to manage expectations, right? Just before I get into that. Tara May, thank you so much for joining the channel. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your ongoing support and you care for the channel. I really appreciate that. And JZ Bacco says, thoughts on the debate crowd bought by Bloomberg. Again, JZ, if you might have come in a little bit late. What we were talking about is I can't say in any definitive sense the crowd bought by Bloomberg or not. I can't say that. What I can say, and again, I've noted this, the crowd was full of people that I think, according to the reports I've read, paid $1,700 up to $3,300 for their tickets, which means that these are not the sort of folks typically that are going to be in the Bernie crowd. And again, as I noted before, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are when you look at the aggregate polling, two of the most popular people in the general primary process. And so what that means is in most of the crowds we've seen, Bernie and Warren, when they talk, get a lot of cheers because on aggregate, Democrats like Bernie and they like Warren. Here tonight, they got a lot of boos, both of those people. And I think it's because the crowd was super rich, and Bernie especially, but even Warren to some degree, have policies that are not very popular with the rich and wealthy and well-connected. And so maybe that played a role. Edward Stearns, thank you so much for joining the channel. I really appreciate it again. Thanks so much for the support. And thanks for all the people joining the channel today. It's great to see. It helps to build the community. One of the little perks is you get your name gets highlighted here, which when I get to questions and stuff, it'll help me know who's a member of the channel. And also, it gives you access to special little emojis. There's little fun emojis if you like using them. So that's something to consider as well. But yeah, I mean, that's my perspective. I don't think it's going to move South Carolina all that much. Now, in terms of Super Tuesday, we got a bit more time. it's going to be hard to say if this debate affected Super Tuesday because one, there's so many variables that go into play in any kind of calculation, but especially because the bigger effect on Super Tuesday, which is a week from today, next Tuesday, where basically a third of all the delegates are going to be handed out, the biggest effect is going to be the South Carolina primary, which I believe is Saturday. And so because of that, so see Karen just shared our little Bernie. It's a little Bernie emoji. We have a little Tommy Douglas one, a little NDP one, things like that, right? So in a sense, that's what we're not quite sure where it's going to go necessarily, right? We're not quite sure with that. I think tonight's debate won't have a major effect on Super Tuesday. Bloomberg wasn't a disaster like he was last time. I don't know if he's going to take a big tumble. Bernie Sanders, again, I don't think Bernie lost anyone tonight. I don't know if he won a whole load of people tonight either. So Bernie and all the major characters, all the major candidates may well be status quo. And again, when somebody said who won the debate tonight, there's like two ways you can answer that question, which is like, did who performed best, quote unquote, and who did what they need to do in terms of the broad game of the race, right? Like, and so the question from my perspective then is like, I don't know if anyone won tonight. Crystal Ball. Many of you guys maybe watch Crystal on Hill TV. I just got a baby channel here, about 15,000, 16,000 subscribers, but she's got a massive channel. And she basically said the winner of tonight's debate was anyone who didn't watch it, and the loser was everyone who did, basically. And I mean, I don't know if I'd go so far to say that, but I would say that it was the sort of debate where no one really won. I don't think anyone won this debate. But if you're asking who wins in a sense, Karen Sita says the moderators are the losers of the debate. I think that's actually a pretty decent answer, Karen, if I'm being honest. If I'm being honest about it, right? Matt says I just jumped in. I'm not too late. No, Matt, no one's ever too late. And you can always hop back and watch the beginning part later. But, I would say that Bernie won because when you're the front runner, you win as long as you remain the front runner, right? Like, unless somebody else goes and does something to actively win the debate, then no one's won the debate, right? Like, that's the simple reality here. And so I don't think anyone actually won this debate in a way that really has this long-term effect of producing any change in the race. And so because of that, no one really won the debate. That's my view, right? So going, Karen, I believe it was Samantha maybe had a question. Sorry, I had to refresh my screen because it was glitching out. But basically she said, won't Joe Biden get momentum from winning South Carolina? And the question is that it depends. It depends. I think there are a few factors. The size of Biden's win will matter. We have to remember, and I think that's why it's important for us, like Bernie supporters, people who do Bernie-related media, have to manage expectations a little bit. Not necessarily saying that we can't win and we shouldn't try, but more to say that, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, a couple months ago, Joe Biden was winning South Carolina by 30 points in some polls. 30. Biden was setting up to win South Carolina by a bigger margin than Bernie won Nevada. And we know how badly Bernie wiped the floor with everybody in Nevada, right? So we have to be ready to say that if Bernie ends up, say, pulling in within 5, 4, 3%, whatever, or closer, then that's a win for Bernie. It's a win because if the goal is to win as many delegates as you can, then every percent matters. Every percent is more delegates. And every percent less for Joe Biden is less delegates. So if you're Bernie and it's like, I want to have a delegate lead, then I don't need to win a state like South Carolina. I just need to be a strong second. If Biden ends up winning by a larger margin, however, then it could give Biden some momentum. One thing it could do for momentum, and this might not affect Bernie as much, not on Super Tuesday necessarily, is that if Bernie Sanders, if Joe Biden wins South Carolina, and because Michael Bloomberg had such a disastrous performance in the debates, and even though it was a shellacking, Joe Biden did end up finishing in a clear second in Nevada. Joe Biden could well reestablish himself as the anti-Bernie camp. That was because it was going to be Bernie versus Biden. We all remember this. And then Bernie won Iowa. People here, Pete lost Iowa. I'm not getting into it. We all know it's true. Bernie won Iowa, but the real story was Biden well down in the count. And then in New Hampshire, same thing. Biden finished, fifth, fourth, whatever it was. He got destroyed. And then going into Nevada, the whole deal was, well, who's the challenger to Bernie? And everyone's like, well, now it's Bloomberg. Because Klobuchar and Buttigieg don't have support from Hispanics and black voters. And Biden sucks. Okay, I'm going to... I often don't have to mute Bernie people, but why are Bernie people spamming my chat? Sorry about that. We are 99, Bernie. We are 99. You're welcome back if you don't spam. So, at the end of the day, if Bloomberg became that default non-Bernie person, then Bloomberg had literally one of the worst debates I've seen in all my years of watching politics. And I don't think I'm exaggerating there. And so Biden can reestablish himself. And that might be the big story. Biden can say, look, Klobuchar and Buttigieg have been awful in South Carolina and Nevada, and it's looking like they will be. They have no support among non-white people. Michael Bloomberg has shown he can't debate his way out of a wet paper bag. And so I'm the only one who has a shot of stopping Bernie Sanders, especially if he wins South Carolina. So that could be the moment in this debate. That could be the moment that actually matters in the debate and the primary coming up. That's what I think could have the biggest effect on Super Tuesday. So that's a great question. In terms of if anyone's going to drop out, I'm not so sure. I think Tom Steyer may drop out soon. Tom Steyer has been in the race a long time. He's been in most of the debates. He's had a big presence, right? Unlike Michael Bloomberg, Tom Steyer, was a billionaire who's basically bought his place in this race. But unlike Bloomberg, he sort of participated in every step of the way. But he's really struggled. He hasn't got a lot of support. He was polling okay in Nevada and very, very much underperformed his polls. And I wonder if Tom Steyer was, in up until now, because he knew that if he was going to have a good state, South Carolina might be that state. And he knew that he was going to get to be in another debate because he was not in the previous debate, but he was in this one. So he's like, look, I get one more debate. I'm Intel, South Carolina. I might reevaluate then. But it's hard right now because, in a functional sense, can you drop out right now between now and Super Tuesday? You're likely already on the ballot. You can drop out, but early votes have been cast. Whether you've earned many or not is irrelevant. What are the effects of Tom Steyer dropping out? So I would say that Steyer dropping out is likely the person most likely to drop out next. Even though he's a billionaire with a lot of money, if the support's not there, I think he'll likely go. So I'm going to start getting to some of these questions. It eventually clears things off from the beginning. So if people were dropping questions super early, I might not get to them. I'm going to get to as many as I can, questions and comments and things like that. A lot of people noting the crowd, had very expensive tickets. Whether or not people were funneled in by Bloomberg or not is something I can't confirm. But Deborah notes that, again, tickets were like $1,700 to $3,200. Not the sort of people that represent regular folks, which is maybe why the crowds were different. Although South Carolina is a more conservative state than a lot of the debate states we've had. It's more conservative than Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada. It's more conservative than like a lot of the big media towns. So it could also be that the population is a bit more conservative. Riaz says the PPP South Carolina poll is BS. That was the poll I was referencing, guys, which had Biden up like 10 or 11 on Bernie, where all the other polls have it basically as a 5-point or less race. I do think Biden, on aggregate in polling, is likely leading, but given that we've seen Biden struggle in every contest thus far, I wouldn't be so sure that Joe Biden has all that big of a lead over Bernie. Cheria says low info voters probably didn't watch this. What a mess. Yeah. Well, I mean, to be clear, and this isn't I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing. I'm saying that it's not a good thing, certainly. Most low information voters don't participate in the primaries, right? The people who participate in primaries are at least, somewhat semi-engaged voters, right? Because like the primaries really matter, of course, but most people don't really start paying attention until the general, right? That's the simple reality. Ryan makes an interesting point that there maybe shouldn't be crowds. I mean, I think that's interesting. I think in some debates, you have a crowd there because it allows some regular people to see the debate live. It also, I think, in certain contexts, makes for a better shot. Although we've had some debates here in Canada where we have debates that are filmed in a studio. The party leaders, all the federal party leaders are on a stage. There's a backdrop. They are standing at podiums or what have you, but there's no crowd. Like the only people behind them are the cameramen, the moderators, their campaign staff, etc., etc. I think, audiences can be a good thing. I think it helps to bring an energy to the room, but I think that there should be less applause for every question. It eats into a lot of time, and as we know, it might not reflect the will of the actual people watching. Joseph says, "Thanks, Tom Perez, for the audience." Yeah, I mean, look, whether or not the audience was handpicked or anything like that, when you make something cost $1,700, you don't need to handpick it to have it be anti-Bernie. Yeah, no, Thomas, I agree with you. This was a debate where Bernie was sort of against the moderators and the rest of the field. And the moderators in this one, and it's something I didn't note off the offset. So Thomas, thanks for sort of reminding me with your comment that this was sort of driven by, in my view, this was sort of driven by a sense that some of the debate questions were actually aimed at, making people look good. Like, they would ask Amy Klobuchar about her, rural housing program. And I'm not saying that's not important. I think, we talk about housing. In Canada, we have this issue, too, where we almost solely focus on, cities. And specifically, the biggest cities. Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, etc. Housing focuses on those cities. But rural and suburban housing accessibility matters. But the question was sort of asked in a way that was well, at the end of the day, here's a free bone to you, Amy Klobuchar. how about you give your talking points for a few minutes and we can make you look good? And all sorts of candidates got that. Like Michael Bloomberg got that, where he was like, would you implement your soda tax? And he basically tried to dodge the question. But then he was like, well, have your plans help New York? And it's almost like the moderator was like feeding him his line to then spout his number. So he was like, she was like, well, when you were mayor, did life expectancy go up in New York City? And he says, well, why, yes, it did. When I was mayor, life expectancy went up by 3 years over the decade and a little bit I was mayor. And as a result, we're now 3 years above the national average. And I'm not suggesting necessarily that there was coordination, but it does seem like some of the candidates, and I don't think Bernie was one of them, got questions that were tailor-made for them to sort of hit a home run, right? Is that going to have a major effect on the course of the nomination primary contest broadly? Probably not, but it's something I noticed. Omar says, hello, is it just me, or did it look like the booing was aimed specifically at certain candidates? I mean, there was a little bit more booing in this contest than I've seen. But it really did seem like Liz and Bernie got most of the booing, and those are candidates that rarely get booed. Right? Again, as I've noted, Bernie and Warren are both very, outside of like the internet where we all fight a lot. Like, you know, there's been the Bernie Warren fights. With Bernie's right in those. Like, I'm not trying to suggest he's wrong, but like those fights don't matter to like 80% of people. They don't matter, maybe more. So Bernie and Warren are both well liked by the average Democrat. The poll I covered today, this morning, in my last video on the channel before this debate, I noted that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are pretty clearly the two most popular people in this primary contest. Like, no doubt about it, they are the two most popular. And so what that means is that they, you know, are bringing a fundamentally important perspective in this race that no one else is really bringing. And most of the time, they weren't getting booed for it. And tonight they did, and I think that was because of the crowd, you know, the tickets costing $600 or $1,700 plus. Again, Zachary said, who will drop out after Super Tuesday? See, that's an interesting question. After Super Tuesday, I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be real gut check time. I think it might be more, who do we think is going to survive for sure after Super Tuesday? And I think Bernie is going to be in no matter what. Like, Bernie's going to keep going. Even if Super Tuesday is underwhelming for him, and even if he doesn't win South Carolina, Bernie's still going to be a front runner in the race, even if some people start to catch up. So Bernie's in after Super Tuesday. I think Michael Bloomberg is still in. Whether it makes sense or not, Michael Bloomberg has all the money in the world, and he's cocky enough to think, and he's deluded enough to think that he can win this, and that he can beat Trump, and that he'd be a good president. So Bloomberg's likely in after Super Tuesday. And I would say Biden has a chance to be in if he wins South Carolina and doesn't have a disastrous Super Tuesday. That if he gets enough, if he wins South Carolina and he has a decent chunk of delegates on Super Tuesday, he'll likely start to see more donations flow in, and he could stay in. I don't necessarily know when Warren and Klobuchar and Buttigieg are going to drop out, but I gotta feel that unless they pull something surprising off, they'll have to drop out, like, soon. Right? Like, they don't have a lot of money. Super Tuesday costs a ton of money to do right. It's effectively a national primary. Like, it's like in a dozen states. Some of those states are very big states that cost a lot of money to buy ads in, that cost a lot of money to run campaigns in, and the states are spread out all across the country. So there's some, you know, there's California, and there's also states in the north. There's states in the traditional south, meaning that you have to have a national infrastructure. So I don't know the exact answer, Zachary, but what I do know is I think Bernie and Bloomberg and maybe Biden are going to go beyond Super Tuesday. Unless I see something different, I don't know how long Klobuchar, Warren, and Buttigieg can keep going. Mr. X, I did not enjoy this so-called debate. Joseph, that's interesting about debates, about ads. I mean, I don't know if they put more ads or less ads in these particular videos. I think this video has actually been demonetized, which means if anything, there'd probably be less ads than normal. So I do let ads run. YouTube sort of does that automatically during these things, so I'm not exactly sure. In terms of Snow asks if I'll be doing videos about the rail blockades. Again, tonight we're focusing on the debate. I've done a little bit of talking about that on previous live streams. I will be talking about that tomorrow night. In terms of dedicated videos, there's a bunch of things I'm looking at. There's everything from what will audiences want to watch to what will get demonetized to what I feel, and this is crucial here, what I feel comfortable talking about, and when I feel uncomfortable about something, what is the harm I would cause by getting something wrong? And when I speak about Indigenous issues, I know the harm that can be done by European Canadian commentators not knowing what they're talking about. And I'm very cautious about talking about Indigenous issues without having a real expertise. So that's something I'm very cognizant about. I don't mind doing it, on live streams or on Twitter, but to make a dedicated video, I really want to be confident. And frankly, guys, I know where I stand, which is with the blockade protesters, which is against Justin Trudeau, which is even to some degree against John Horgan, who's the premier of a party that I'm a supporter of. But I don't know if a video is something I'd be making at this point right now. I'm not sure. I have to really think about what I want to say, and I have to make damn sure, guys, that I do justice to Indigenous people when I say it. And if there's a choice between me saying nothing, and not getting my views out on a particular issue, or me saying something and causing harm through spreading misinformation, even if my intents were good, I'll say nothing, right? And I think that's important. Dan E says, what do you think about Bernie Berg saying that he won at the last debate? Trump like fake news narrative or nah? Yeah, I think Bloomberg was trying to tell a joke, but no, literally, I don't think a single person in that building laughed. It fell totally flat, totally, absolutely flat. Like, I don't know. It was awful. I definitely caught that. I also caught Bloomberg saying that he bought the Congress. Like, I don't know what he was trying to get at there. That, like, he bought the Congress and he was basically trying to, like, say that he has resources, but that he's basically implying he was bribing people with those resources. Anthony Maldonado says, and thank you for the super chat, guys, for all you people giving super chat support. I really appreciate it. Says 22,000 dislikes, 11,000 likes, says it all. We have nervous, and that's the point. Don't freak out. Yeah, look, a lot of people from what I saw on YouTube were not a fan of the debate. I don't know if there was a live chat for that debate, but I definitely saw them have a really bad dislike ratio, which lets me know that either people were mad with the questions or if the failure of the moderating style, it was not well received on YouTube. Yeah, see, Violet says, no one really won, but Bernie didn't lose anything. That's what matters when you're the front runner. Yeah, some people are saying it's freezing. I'm not sure. I was having a few issues a little bit ago when I got this, so it looks like it's cleared up. So I don't know if there was just a bit of an internet issue, but it looks more stable now. Ryan says, the commercials showed 3 Bloomberg ad and 1 slamming Medicare for all. Ryan, my feed, that I was watching it on YouTube, so I didn't see those ads because during the breaks for us, they just showed like a wide shot of the auditorium the debate was in, just showing people like moving around during the break. But from what I saw is as you note on TV, apparently they were showing these anti-Medicare for all and pro-Bloomberg commercials. That does not surprise me. The ad spot for these debates is probably pretty pricey. And if you want to reach people who you sort of know are voting in this contest, well, by design, people who are watching this are most likely going to be participating. I don't know if there should be rules about the sort of advertising that can be done during debates, but it's something to consider. I know in Canada, most of our political debates don't have commercials during them. If they take a break, they'll go to panelists. They'll go to a pundit group to talk about what happened over that segment. But they don't normally air debates or ads during the debates. And maybe that's for the best, because I feel like, especially if the ads criticize a candidate or a policy or support one, it's a real conflict of interest in a sense, or at least it's perceived to be. Gary says, I really think Bernie will win South Carolina. Gary's one of the members of this channel. He didn't just lose the debate. He just didn't lose the debate. He killed it in a lot of other stuff. No one hit him. I mean, Gary, I think you're right. I'm not saying this was a bad debate for Bernie. What I'm saying, he's had better debates. He's had much better debates. My point is less that, did Bernie lose or win? It's more like Bernie won because he didn't lose and no one else won. Now that sounds convoluted. All it means is when you're the front runner, all that matters is you didn't lose. That's what matters, right? That's what 100% matters. So that's where we're at with that. So that's my view there. In terms of will he win South Carolina, gosh, I hope so. I really do. I really hope so. But I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure if he's gonna win. I'm not 100%. I hope so. I would not at all be surprised. I think that Bernie's level of organization will be crucial. One encouraging thing for Bernie, and it might not necessarily reflect in South Carolina particularly, but as I noted in a video yesterday, Bernie Sanders is now nationally polling above Joe Biden among black voters. And if that's true, there is a chance that Joe Biden's advantage with African American voters is sort of disappearing, and that could be crucial for Bernie picking up a narrow, upset victory in South Carolina. It remains to be seen. That poll was followed up by a poll today which reconfirmed that Bernie now leads among black voters. But, black voters don't all operate the same way in every part of the country. And in a state like South Carolina, the black population may be more loyal to Biden and more steadfast with Biden than the black population in, let's say, New York State. We don't know that yet. Zachary says, well, do you think Biden's going to underperform his polls? I'm not sure. I think he might. If you look at the polling average, there is one suspect poll dragging it up. So he might underperform that average, but he might still perform relatively well to the other polls we've seen, because there is something of a polling consensus here in South Carolina besides that poll, which is that it's close between Bernie and Biden, right? If it's close between the two. Salvador Garcia says, any similarities between Lopez Obrador and Sanders? Obrador from Mexico, of course. I mean, there are similarities. They're both left-leaning figures for their country. They've both challenged the political and social and economic status quo. I think that, Obrador came in at a time where Mexico had sort of already signed off on the new NAFTA, but I'm guessing he would have been a more critical voice in that. He's obviously he's a more neutral dealer in terms of foreign policy, as we know. After Evo Morales was unjustly forced out of Bolivia, he eventually found his way, I believe, to Mexico, or at least Mexico, in the hours following that, opened its borders to Evo Morales, showing that they were going to, pick sides here and defend the rightful president, from my perspective, of Bolivia. Simple as that, right? And so, ultimately, there are some similarities. I'm not an expert on Mexico or of AMLO in particular, but I do see some similarities. I do. And I think that like a North America with AMLO as president of Mexico, as Bernie as president of the United States, and of Jagmeet Singh as prime minister of Canada would be a great continent. Do low information voters ever watch debates? Matt Lipton, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Like, maybe they watch presidential debates, like the general debates. I'm not sure. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Wanakin says, but is Tom Steyer trending in South Carolina? I'm not sure if you mean Twitter trending. He is doing well in South Carolina, but I'm not sure if it's going to pay off for him. Clarity of Mind says, I hope that we are extremely surprised to hear Amy Klobuchar and Tom Steyer surrender their delegates to Bernie when they drop out. I mean, right now, I think what's going to happen when people drop out, because so far nobody who's won delegates has dropped out. I don't think anyone is going to be surrendering delegates yet at this stage. I mean, maybe like somebody endorses someone and gives their delegates over, but I think everyone's probably going to hold their delegates for as long as they can because of the slim hope, however slim, that maybe like a contested convention could make them the nominee. Because right now, if you look at 538, I'm going to pull up 538 again, but if you look at 538, if you go there and you look at who is going to win the primary, and if you look right now, it gives Bernie Sanders a 68% chance of winning the most delegates, but only a 43% chance of winning an outright majority. But no one else is close to winning a majority either. So I think the goal for everybody right now is keep Bernie below a majority of delegates and hope to God he's not so close to the majority that we can try to take it from him by unifying delegates and by, getting the super delegates involved. That's the only thing they can do right now. Now, I think Bernie can still win a majority. If Bernie wins South Carolina tomorrow, like this could, or it's not tomorrow, sorry, later this week, this race could be over. This race could be over because Biden's done, and no one else will have won a contest. Pete Buttigieg can continue the lie and say he won Iowa, but Bernie would have gone 4 for 4, and he's polling really well on Super Tuesday. It's game over. And so, I think everyone's goal right now is to get their delegates and keep them even if they end up dropping out. Yeah, Deborah, you're right that Bernie Sanders really, Deborah says that Bernie really does his best when he answers with facts, and you're right. Bernie Sanders, for the most part in this debate, always hammered home, which is like, you want to talk about me, you want to slander me. Here's my policy, here's my philosophy, and it's backed up by a fact. It's backed up by a piece of data. And without sounding boring, or without sounding like he's just reading cue cards, Bernie Sanders really hammers those points home. Thetwo says, thank you for the instant live and very well-informed commentary of these debates. I'm a loyal subscriber now. Thank you so much for that. I mean, this is I really enjoy doing this. And I feel there's a lot of, people get a lot of value of me coming on and giving these commentaries. And I think a lot of people, after you watch these debates, you sort of get gaslit in a way because, like, the mainstream media is telling you this and that. And I'm not saying that, like, I know everything and the media is wrong, but it is to say that, like, it's good to get, like, a perspective of somebody who's not in that, like, elite media bubble. Like, there was a thing on MSNBC today. It's just a small tangent. But there was a journalist on MSNBC today, like a pundit or whatever, not one of their big dogs, but like a regular on their network, who was talking about Bernie and basically being like, oh yeah, no wonder young people love him. They're just getting out of college. They're getting their first job. They're only making 70 or 80 grand a year. And like, they're poor and they need help and stuff. And like all of this. And it's like basically saying Bernie Sanders people are just voting for him to get free stuff. But he's like, he thinks $70,000 or $80,000 a year is not a lot of money. When, of course, as we know, for most people in Canada and the US, 70, 80 grand a year is you're not rich by any means, but that's a very good income. Most people don't make that. And there's a lot of families in both countries that don't make $70,000 or $80,000 together. Like when you add up both incomes, right? Like it's really says something. Yeah, Linda says, like a lot of us have, this debate, not the best for Bernie, not the worst, not a lot of changes coming. I would agree. Like Debbie says that we need more open communication about Cuba. No, you're right. We need more open communication about everything. Like look, Bernie Sanders was right to have an open conversation about a country. And if you're going to criticize a country, I think it's more effective to do so without sounding like you're unwilling to take the good and the bad of that country. When you say a country is like just evil and there's nothing good about it and there's nothing ever good about it, then, most of the time that's not true. Because there are some countries that are truly abhorrent, historical ones especially, that deserve almost no praise. But like, if you're going to make meaningful criticisms of Cuba, it helps if you acknowledge what they've done well. Right? So even from a purely strategic manner, if you want to be like constructive, you offer compliments, you offer positive signs as well as criticisms of a given society. Other candidates aren't willing to do that. They either condemn Cuba as a hell on earth, or they praise America's anti-democratic capitalist allies all over the world without any criticism at all. Yeah, a lot of people are saying that Biden is underperforming his polls. Nevada wasn't as big of an underperformance for him as the first two states. So it remains to be seen if he underperforms by how much. If it's like Iowa and New Hampshire, Biden's in real trouble because he vastly underperformed in those states. He vastly underperformed. Like if we remember, like he was poised as having a chance to win Iowa. And he ended up being not anywhere close at all, right? Like it was an awful night for him. Awful night. Whereas, Nevada, his polling was pretty decent. All in all, like he had a strong second. Not strong in the sense that he was anywhere close to Bernie, but strong as in that, like, he was a good ways ahead of Buttigieg. Kevin, the polls in South Carolina, the polls that I've seen, for the most part, if I can look up RCP right now. If I look up RCP right now, Kevin, all the recent polls have Biden leading. There hasn't been a poll of South Carolina of Biden not winning. So I'll just read over the last couple ones. All the ones done in February. Not all of these are on the average, but they're all done in February. Biden +8, a tie. Biden +5, Biden +2, Biden +5. The PPP poll, Biden +15. And then another poll, Biden +4. And so what we see clearly is that if you take out that +15 poll, which is an anomaly, Biden is most likely leading anywhere from 2 to 5 points. Right? That's where we're at there. So Biden is still the favorite in South Carolina, but if he underperforms and or Bernie overperforms, you could see him do quite well there. Yeah, Vaudry says, even the worst Canadian debates were better than that one. Yeah, I totally agree. Jonathan, I don't believe I saw this poll that said Bernie was up 4 points in South Carolina. It's not in the RCP. Maybe I saw something like that, but like it's certainly not the norm. The average is that Bernie is that like, well, let me just pull up one of my polling accounts on Twitter. I could take a quick look. One of my favorite polling accounts basically says, won't lie, that poll really sucked. So here are the polling averages according to one of my polling aggregates. They use a slightly different formula than the other things. They say Biden is polling on average of about 30, Bernie 24, Tom Steyer 17. Everyone else is like below 11, right? So that's what they're saying right now. Biden has the advantage in South Carolina. Look, we could say whether or not he'll actually win, but the polling average is in his favor, even still. Lulu says, what happens if at the brokered convention, Bloomberg gives Biden his delegates? So, as I understand it, and I'm not strictly an expert. I'm not an expert on American conventions in particular. And I can't remember the last time there's been a brokered convention like in federal American politics. But generally the way it works is on the first ballot, the only votes that matter are directly correlated to who got them. So, even if you've dropped out, your delegates still have to go, I believe, and vote for you on that first ballot because those delegates were won in the primary for you. So if Amy Klobuchar drops out, say next week, she has a few delegates. I don't know exactly how many. She has some. Those delegates will go to the convention and cast votes for her. If one person cannot reach, it's like 1,991 delegates, it's a particular number, just under 2,000, then the super delegates can come in. And then the votes in the first round are not necessarily bound in the same way. I don't know if those people have to listen to the candidate that supported them. I don't know if, for instance, all of Warren's delegates have to listen to Warren. I'm not sure. Or if people have more choice after the first round. But what I do know is that after that first round, the super delegates can cast a vote, and delegates are not necessarily bound to who they were with when the process started. But in a hypothetical situation, like, I mean, one way, if the aggregates are to be believed, if you look at this, like the delegates right now, you know, if you added all of Biden and all of Bloomberg's delegates together, they would be close to Bernie. If I do the calculations right here, let me just pull up my calculator here. I'm gonna take a look. The calculator. Pull this up. Basically, what this says is that Joe Biden, 928, so 928 plus 749. Right now, Biden and Bloomberg together would be about 100 delegates shy of Bernie right now, according to the projections at 538. And those projections include a win for Joe Biden in South Carolina. They include Joe Biden with a relatively small win in that state, for perspective. So, if Bernie wins South Carolina, the projections will be better for Bernie. So Bernie right now is projected as being about 200 or so delegates short of winning. So you could hypothetically, if Bloomberg and Biden and one of the other people could add their delegates in, they could catch Bernie. But there's a lot that needs to happen before that happens. Yeah, D-McC, basically, I think I agree with you that Bernie said, like Bernie's got to push for a win, and Bernie is pushing for a win. Bernie, I believe yesterday or the day before, it came out that he was buying an extra $500,000 or so of ads in South Carolina, realizing that there's a chance for him to win here. Like, he has a chance. So a last minute push with a bit more of spending there is crucial. So Bernie knows it's possible. And I don't want to tell anybody, especially if you're here from South Carolina, like, basically, if you're here from South Carolina, sorry, I saw a spammer there. It's hard for me to catch it when I'm here, but basically, if you're from South Carolina, I don't want to tell you Bernie can't win. I don't want to tell you that. But if Bernie has a strong second, that is a win in the grand scheme of things. The media will tell you otherwise, but remember that Biden should be winning South Carolina by 30, not 3. Yeah. Right now, delegates don't matter as much. Super Tuesday is when the delegate math starts to matter. After Super Tuesday, for a couple reasons. One, it's the first time where we get a significant amount of delegates. Right? By Super Tuesday, I think over a third of all the delegates will have been counted. So you can start to get a little bit of a mathematical sense for what's happening in this particular contest, right? You could do that, right? You don't have that at this stage. Also, you could start getting some good comparisons to the previous cycle. And in the last cycle, Hillary Clinton, by the end of Super Tuesday, only led Bernie Sanders by about 170 delegates. Bernie is projected to have a much bigger lead this time and in a multi-contestant race, which I think bodes really well for Bernie. Yeah, somebody in the chat noted, and I saw it too, where it was Bernie making some faces when everyone was attacking him was really great to see. Just realizing that this is all they have nothing. I'm just going to keep on selling my vision to regular people, and these people can continue to make fools of themselves. A lot of people noting the tickets prices and how that might have skewed the debate. Yeah, Michael Bloomberg coming out against marijuana legalization is stupid. One, he's wrong, but it's just politically stupid. If you want to win a Democratic primary, like, I think you probably do need to come out in favor of legalization. Even people that are uncomfortable with marijuana, like, personally, I think believe that the criminalization and illegalization of it has caused far more harm than good. Even if you're just worried about the children, like, and I think like that taking that position is awful. It's an awful position. Yeah, Kevin, I do think there was an element to try to attack Bernie here, and I wonder if it is going to work. I mean, if it comes off as too blatantly anti-Bernie, then it could backfire, and people aren't stupid. People aren't stupid. They'll realize what they're trying to be force-fed, and they'll reject it. Joseph says, Senator Sanders, why did you personally direct members of your campaign to vandalize Team Bloomberg location? These are the kind of questions he tends to be asked. Yeah, I mean, you're right. And it's funny because, like, Bloomberg's campaign offices got vandalized. So did Bernie's. But, like, you know, like, this whole narrative from Bloomberg is, like, this is a unique thing and that they're trying to connect it to tweets on the internet. And it's just ridiculous. And Michael Bloomberg also complained because, like, people taped a sign to his door that said, like, oligarch or eat the rich, when that's just funny. Yes, Skip says my cat is hungry. You might hear Smokey. Smokey makes some appearances on the stream from time to time. he is a bit meowier than usual tonight, so I'm sure you guys don't mind. Most of the people on my channel love Smokey. So if he comes over later, I'll show him to you all again. Yeah, everyone's saying I heard your cat. Yeah, so a lot of people, I was like, are they going to hear Smokey? He's being pretty loud tonight. A says 700 people. You got super popular, Crystal. Well, we're a little bit less right now, but the streams have been bigger lately than they used to be. But a few weeks ago even, the streams usually only had maybe 100, 200 people in them, and that was a good day. And so because the channel has been growing, and because we are doing a debate night stream, they generally do better. There's a bigger audience, which makes the streams more fun. Because, I have to try to get through the questions, but when there's more people here, I know you guys can have conversations yourselves. Zachary, I do think Bernie's going to win most, if not all, of the delegates in California. He won't sweep 100% because even if everyone else is below 15, they'll likely get like delegates on a county or congressional district basis. But Bernie could get a virtual sweep of California, which would give him a massive lead. Cynthia says Warren won't endorse Bernie. Cynthia, I honestly don't know. I really don't know if he's going to I don't know. Part of me thinks she won't, given how she's acted, but maybe she feels it's good for her legacy. Maybe she's confident Bernie can win, and she wants to be part of his team in some way. I don't know. She should endorse Bernie. Like Bernie should have like way back when this started, I would say that most Bernie supporters and most Warren supporters would have said, we want one of these two campaigns to win, and the loser has to endorse the winner to help that person win the nomination and win the presidency. I don't know if Warren's going to do that, guys. I don't know. Yeah, Stephen Colbert Cheese says that Bernie had a lead over nobody in a delegate majority. Yeah, so it's going to fluctuate day to day, that number, based on real results and based on polling, both national and statewide. So it's not so much to look necessarily at those numbers every single day, but it's more to show that not only is Bernie the leader, he's the clear leader, that the second and third place candidates in terms of projected delegates don't add up to Bernie. And that means that, when we talk about like taking the convention for Bernie, like when we talk about stealing the convention, it's not like we're in a scenario where you go to convention and we're projected to see Bernie with, say, 1,500 delegates and Joe Biden with 1,400 delegates, where you could have a debate about who represents the will of the party more. Bernie Sanders is going to go to that convention. He's likely going to have a massive lead over the rest of the field. And if you ask yourself, well, we don't want Bernie, we want someone else, anyone you pick is going to be so much less popular than Bernie Sanders. Again, we're not looking at a scenario most likely where Bernie effectively ties somebody at the convention. We're not looking at that. We're looking at a scenario where Bernie could conceivably beat the first and second place candidates, or second and third place combined. Somebody says, do superdelegates believe in democracy? I mean, superdelegates probably. They do. I'm not saying the superdelegates, don't believe in democracy on a personal level, but their position in this process is undemocratic. Yes, Joseph makes a great point here that, and this is not Castro debate, but Nelson Mandela is one of the most revered people globally in the last 100 years, probably. I don't think that's an exaggeration. He's a hero to millions of people around the world, hundreds of millions of people. And he was a big fan of Fidel Castro because of how Fidel Castro, more than any other leader really for so long, fought for the freedom of African peoples when almost no other country would. And so that's an important part of Castro's legacy. Again, that doesn't excuse some of the things that happened in Cuba, but it does show that there's much to praise there. Louise says Trump is going to win because of Dem bickering. Louise, I'm not sure if I agree. Look, hypothetically, could infighting in the party hurt the eventual nominee? Maybe. But if we remember the Obama-Clinton 2008 primary, that was a long time ago, so you might not remember it. But that was really vicious. We don't think of it as such because Obama and Clinton became allies afterwards. She became Secretary of State, and they're both neoliberals. So they sort of buried the hatchet in time. But, Clinton said awful things about Obama. Obama said some pretty bad stuff about Clinton, although I think she was worse than he was. And a lot of Clinton voters, way more than Bernie voters in 2016, voted for John McCain and proudly did so. They chose McCain. A lot of Clinton voters chose McCain over Obama for whatever reason. Right? And Obama won big. You had a big win. So that doesn't necessarily apply. And if I'm not defending this, but Trump was a monster to his Republican competitors. Called Ted Cruz the Zodiac killer, said his dad killed Ted Kennedy, or JFK, made fun of Marco Rubio being sweaty, low energy Jeb, mocking people, giving them mocking nicknames. We haven't seen anything close to that in this Democratic primary. We haven't, right? And Trump won big again. Was it a bit fluky with the allocation of votes? Yeah, sure, but he won. He won. So I'm not necessarily sure if a divided primary, if a bitter primary leads to weak results. I mean, Maximus, Bernie's positions, I think are quite reasonable from a progressive perspective. Bernie Sanders on immigration and on healthcare, I think strikes the right tone. And I understand your concern that this might alienate certain segments of the working class. But, I mean, at the end of the day, Donald Trump and his, positions haven't solved the migration crisis. Cruelty hasn't solved it, right? And so I think a position which recognizes the universal dignity of human beings is something we can all support. And we can, or at least we can all be won over to. And, maybe that policy position is one that Bernie will have to look at how to position in the general election. I'm not sure how he does that. That's a good point. But I do think that working class people have always loved Bernie Sanders more than anybody else. And I think they will continue to love him. Yeah, Aaron, I think you're right. If Biden wins South Carolina, he's definitely going to stay in past Super Tuesday. And it might cause a continued split between Bloomberg and Biden. Then again, maybe at that point, Bloomberg is splitting the vote because Bloomberg could suffer if Biden is perceived as making a comeback. Well, yeah, Benjamin, look, I'm not going to defend, again, the full outcomes of Castro's Cuba, but yeah, I will 100% say that the vast majority of Cuban Americans that, love to cry about Castro, or he took my plantation, he took my, indentured servants. Yeah, I mean, I get that. I'm not defending these people at all. But I am saying that, like, look, at some point it would have been nice to transition to free and fair elections, and for Castro to step aside. I know it's not always feasible. The United States, the way they treated Cuba, put them under a kind of permanent state of siege. But we can't ignore the fact that Cuba is not the ideal paradise of the left either. And that's all I'm saying. That Bernie Sanders, like I said, if anything, was too harsh on Cuba, but he is right to criticize them. Like we should criticize Cuba, just like we should criticize the limitations of Norway and Sweden and Finland, societies that we often praise. They have failures too, and we should criticize them. Wanakin says that Biden might take some soft Steyer support. That could be Biden's key to victory, which is why he was attacking Steyer tonight. Attack Steyer because Bernie's support is rock hard, pretty much everywhere. Bernie has the most stable and dedicated support base. And so, hard to peel off Bernie voters, right? It's hard. Like, we're a pretty loyal bunch, aren't we? Like Bernie supporters. Tom Steyer supporters, though, I don't know how loyal they are. Tom Steyer's not really that well known. Maybe some people are voting for Steyer because they don't really love Bernie and they don't really love Biden, but maybe Biden can convince them to vote for him. I think that's a potential. If Tom Steyer really collapses, Biden, that could be the key to Biden's win. Somebody says water in a Coke bottle, dope as shit. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm lazy, and so I just fill up my bottle because my washroom's right there, and I can just get some water quickly during the stream. Oh, Joseph makes a great point. Like, look, and I'm not like I'm not trying to just do whataboutism, but like, look, we have propaganda in our system too. And there was a great post on Twitter where everyone's like, yeah, Cuba's got great literacy, but it just makes them able to read propaganda. But it's like, if you read some of our historical textbooks, if you read our media in Canada, for instance, if you read media in the United States, you see so much propaganda upholding neoliberalism, colonialism, inequality, suffering around the world, and it's justified in our media all the time. Aaron says, Christo, did you see Pete Buttigieg get chased out of a fight for 15 March? I did. I did see that, Aaron. I was debating making a video on it today, but when I saw that, I had already made a second video. Sometimes I make 3 videos in a day, but I try not to when I do a stream. You don't want to flood the channel too much. People don't like having like 5 or 6 videos a day on their channel. And YouTube only sends out so many notifications, so there's a diminishing return. So I didn't end up making a video on that. But I did see it and talk about it on social media. So if people don't know, Pete Buttigieg was at a Fight for 15 rally. I'm not sure where, but most of the participants were African American and racialized people, protesting for a basic a living wage in their workplace, and they were primarily food service industry workers. And then they basically started chanting, "Pete won't be my president." He didn't do anything about racism in South Bend. And they basically chanted him out, and some people tried to start asking him questions. Pete was not having that. He just wanted a nice, clean photo op that, would just be nice and smooth so that he could pretend to lie about the fact that black people don't hate him. But then basically started running away. He wasn't running, but he was briskly walking, let's say, away from this crowd of African Americans who didn't want to be his photo op. It was beautiful to see. It was beautiful. Cloud asks that who has won delegates. Bernie has won delegates. Klobuchar has won delegates. Buttigieg has won delegates. Biden and Warren. Basically, those ones have all won delegates. Those 5. Steyer hasn't won any delegates because he hasn't really been competitive. I don't believe he's won any delegates, unless I'm wrong. Has Steyer won any delegates? Let me look here. 2020. Let me look at the delegate count. So if I look at the delegate count here on NBC, right now, the people that are technically running. So here's who's still technically in the race or who's been on a ballot. Michael Bennet has 0. Patrick Duvall or Duvall Patrick, 0. Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard, 0. Tom Steyer, 0. Klobuchar has 7 delegates through the 3 states. Warren, 8. Biden, 13. Buttigieg, 26. Bernie Sanders, 40. You need 1,991 delegates to win outright on the first ballot, for perspective. So that's where we're at. It's extremely early, right? Super Tuesday is going to be the first day where we start to get a real sense of who's leading in delegates, who's got real advantages. We could start to make better projections about who's on a path for a victory and or a majority. Right now, we just don't know. Like, honestly, we don't have enough information. But those are the ones with delegates, those 5 candidates. Yeah, Cloud, you're right. Like, we've noted earlier, but like if Biden does get a big win or if somebody gets a big win in this contest, then like that's going to change the game, right? That's going to change the game, right? If Biden wins big, it'll be a big deal. Bernie's still the front runner, don't get me wrong. But like the Biden is back. The Biden is a challenger. Bernie is the front runner, but it's not a runaway. Biden's still got game. That narrative will play, and even if you don't believe it, a lot of people will. So the margins matter. Somebody asks, is Smokey a Persian? No, Smokey, we actually don't quite know. We got Smokey. He was a cat we got off Kijiji and almost 10 years ago now, actually. About 10 years ago when he was relatively young. He wasn't a kitten, but he wasn't old. And we didn't know much about him. It was like somebody's like, I have a cat. I can't take care of it anymore. Would you like to have it? And so we took him in. So we don't know much about his. He's certainly not a purebred. Yeah, Matt Lipton makes a great point that like oligarch is like such a like contextual term amongst American politics until recently, where like oligarch only ever referred to rich bad people in like other countries, like Russia or like a developing country. They have oligarchs. America has billionaires who aren't oligarchs. But like all billionaires are bad. I don't know if all billionaires are oligarchs. I would lean towards saying yes. But like Michael Bloomberg is certainly an oligarch. Coney says, my cat is bugging me too. Mine is named Stubby. And he's got a bobtail and he's polydactyl. Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. I love that everyone has all these cool cats and stuff. Jive says, yeah, I learned about me from David Dole. Yeah, David Dole's great, right? David Dole is really good at covering American politics, Canadian politics like I do. And, when my channel was really, really small, even less than 1,000 subscribers, I went on David's channel, and it was really helpful for him to come out and support the channel. I really and a lot of people who came to my channel came through David Dole. Yeah, they tried to get Bernie on like IPAC and Palestine, Israel. It didn't work. It didn't work in this debate. It's something that, frankly, I don't think a lot of people honestly give a damn about, which is maybe a bad thing because, like, Israel-Palestine's an important human rights issue. You know, it's important. It's a major global issue of our time, but, I mean, I don't know, right? I don't think it's going to stick. Bernie handled that pretty reasonably. One thing I saw on social media, guys, which is that Pete Buttigieg did that quote, basically has Pete Buttigieg saying that he doesn't want the radicalism of the 1960s in Bernie Sanders, but the radicalism of the 1960s included the civil rights movement, aka Martin Luther King, and so they deleted the tweet of Pete Buttigieg saying that. They kind of quote tweeted him saying it, but there's video of him up on Twitter where basically Pete makes fun of or denounces the civil rights era, which is very telling for a man that has basically 2% support among black people. Yeah, guys, again, people are saying that the crowd was bought. I can't say that. All I can say is that the nature of the pricing means that the crowd would, generally be oppositional to Bernie and maybe Liz Warren in a way that a crowd of, say, just people who are, the prices are way cheaper, or maybe, people are, it's first come, first serve, or you have to get a lottery to get tickets. Like, that's a much better representation of regular people. Somebody says, show Smokey. Again, Smokey's sleeping right now. Whenever he does come over, he joins the stream. I don't think he'll take Warren as vice president either. Few reasons. One, I think the relationship has soured. But, Bernie needs to hit some things that he isn't. Warren is a woman. That does matter. But it's not everything. And there's lots of qualified women. But Warren is also older herself. Warren is in her 70s. She's not a young woman. She's younger than Bernie, but not by a whole lot. Warren is also from the Northeast. Like, they're both from New England states. Bernie from Vermont, Warren from Massachusetts. You might want to pick somebody who's younger, who's racialized, who is from a different region of the country. That might be a move for Bernie. And, I wonder, and if the relationship is good with Warren, I wonder if Warren would rather do something else, take a cabinet position in Bernie's cabinet before being vice president. So I'm not sure. Guillaume says, I saw USA Talking Point on CBC. I thought they were good until I noticed U.S. propaganda and they tried to push Pete, Biden, and Bloomberg. We are not safe. Yeah, look, the Canadian media, again, everyone thinks Canada's, like a lot of Americans, I have to tell you, thinks Canada's like a left-wing paradise. We have the same neoliberal media in this country too. And they don't want to see Bernie Sanders become president. I would say that that regular Canadians would love Bernie being president. But our media doesn't want Bernie as president because he would, work for trade deals that represented working people in the U.S. and in Canada. He would, criticize Canada's right-wing foreign policy. He would, make it so that Canadian parties, especially the Liberal Party, couldn't just pretend to be progressive while doing nothing. He would force the Canadian elite to do more in terms of taxation and things like that if they wanted to hold on to power, because Bernie would prove that, better was possible in the United States, which would shame Canada into being better. So it doesn't surprise me that the Canadian media does not like Bernie Sanders. And a lot of our media is American-owned and American-influenced, right? Like, it's the reality of the Canadian media. So because most mainstream media in the U.S. is anti-Bernie, it doesn't surprise me that a lot of that bleeds over to Canada. Somebody says, does Smokey feel the burn? Smokey is a huge Bernie fan. Yes. He supports the Bernie Sanders Universal Cat Treat program. Cynthia says, like, Max Blumenthal's come out saying that Russiagate is a total farce, now being targeted on Bernie. Look, here's the thing. Russiagate's always been overblown. Do I buy that Russia tried to influence elections globally to serve its own interests? Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Probably. The United States has done that and continues to do that. And so does Canada. When we can't rig elections, we launch coups or support coups in Bolivia and Venezuela. That's election interference. So to be shocked that Russia would do this, I think is wrong. Russia probably has interfered. But this particular narrative of, Bernie Sanders is being helped by Russia, even CNN has basically come out and said that the story that was leaked last week about this is basically nothing. So, that's where I am at with Russiagate. Yeah, I think Donald Trump is afraid of Bernie. Everyone's saying that, like, Donald Trump wants to run against Bernie because he thinks Bernie is weak and blah, 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 blah. But, the Lev Parnas recordings that were released a few weeks ago, like, there's all these like a really long covert recording of Donald Trump by Lev Parnas basically had a bunch of stuff in it, but there was a moment where Trump was really worried about Bernie Sanders. Yeah, Bernie could have won, or that even if Hillary made Bernie her vice president, that Hillary would have defeated Donald Trump because Bernie Sanders is strong where a lot of the mainline Democrats are weak on trade, on perceptions that he cares about workers. Trump wouldn't have been able to sell a populist message with Bernie Sanders as vice president or especially as president. And so Donald Trump said that. So in private, when he doesn't think he's being listened to, Donald Trump makes it very clear. Bernie Sanders scares the crap out of me. I might have lost if Bernie Sanders would have been on the ticket in 2016. That's Trump behind the scenes. So excuse me if I think that maybe Trump is not necessarily being genuine with what he says and how he says it in public. Justin Frederick says, thanks for the super chat, Justin, and everyone else who's been so supportive tonight. Says Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie is a big Bloomberg fan. She endorsed him on day one and even had the audacity to say he's a progressive. I mean, I didn't know that, Justin. Thanks for letting me know. I didn't know that. It doesn't surprise me, but it is certainly ridiculous to call Bloomberg a progressive. Most Canadians, just plainly, if you look at would support the Democrat. Some of the polling I've seen is that in a matchup between the Democrats and Trump, 82% of Canadians would vote for the Democrat. That's a massively. Basically, all the non-conservative voters would almost universally vote for the Democrat, and a big chunk of our Conservative Party members would still vote Democrat before voting for Trump. There hasn't been recent polling on which candidate is most popular, but a lot of people really love Bernie in Canada. A lot of people really love Bernie. There's probably some Warren supporters. Well, Robin Hood says if Canadians love Bernie, why didn't they vote NDP? Lots of reasons. One, Canadians have been effectively lied to and think the Liberals are progressive when they're not. The first past the post system makes it so that the Liberal Party gets a lot of automatic votes. In the last election, as many as 43% of Liberal voters were strategic voting, at least partially, were strategic voters. Canadians, and again, what you love and what you vote for is not always the same. Unfortunate. If you poll people on what they want, dental care, taxing the rich, wealth taxes, electoral reform, dental care, all of the NDP's main policies were supported by the vast majority of Canadians. So they want what Canada has. So that's a major factor. A lot of Canadians think that. And also another factor is that, like, in a hypothetical matchup, like say Bernie versus Trump, pretty much every NDPer, most liberals, most Greens, even if they don't like Bernie, like him a heck of a lot more than Trump, right? So I think that's a factor too. So he says Ted Cruz is not the Zodiac Killer. Look, Ted Cruz was actually like a couple years old when that story broke. He was just a little baby, I think, when those events were happening. But if in all seriousness, if Ted Cruz is anyone, he's Kevin from The Office. If you guys ever saw that meme where there's, picture before he had his beard, Ted Cruz sort of looks like Kevin from The Office. And there's actually a clip of a video online, I think from the last presidential election, where Ted Cruz is giving a speech and there's a guy in the middle of the crowd holds up a big sign with a picture of Kevin and a picture of Ted Cruz. And I think Ted, to his credit, basically had a bit of a chuckle over it because it was pretty funny. Yeah, Rosemary, I would say Bernie Sanders and radicalism is such an interesting question. Is Bernie a radical? I mean, in many ways, no, right? Like what Bernie is proposing in many cases exists in other parts of the world. And so he's not a radical in that sense, but he's undeniably, like, I understand why he doesn't call himself a radical. But Bernie is radical in a lot of ways, in how he's inspired so many people and how he's challenging the establishment inside the Republican and Democratic parties, but also in wider society. Like, Bernie Sanders is bringing radical change in his policies, but also in the way he does politics. So, I understand why Bernie says that, and he's not wrong when he says what I'm proposing isn't radical. But in many ways, Bernie is a radical. So I'm always conflicted. Bernie, he wants to be seen as I'm actually, everyone thinks I'm a far leftist, but at the end of the day, I'm bringing, policies that the rest of the world sees as relatively moderate. I get what Bernie's trying to do, but I still don't necessarily think that's the truth, because Bernie really is pushing for a different sort of politics. Yeah, Cuddle says that we need new labor legislation in this country. The South has ignored their own labor history for far too long. Look, you're 100% right. Like Bernie Sanders fighting for better labor policy is very important. And I know Bernie's talked a lot about it, but it's actually gone relatively under-examined by the media and by even a lot of progressive Sanders folks, like on social media and here on YouTube. I've done some videos on it. Other people have as well. But those videos didn't really perform all that well because I don't know if people understand how important Bernie's labor reforms are. Medicare for all, canceling student debt and canceling tuition. I get it. I get why those are the banner policies. But banishing right to work, card check certification, $15 minimum wage, better health and safety legislation, giving workers more say within, on corporate boards. All of these things are fundamentally important, and they're not getting enough attention, and they're all really good policies. Zachary, I do think it was a good idea for Bernie to release how he was going to pay for things. I do. I understand the concern, which is that he gives them this information. They're never going to say it's enough. So all he's doing is opening himself up to more attacks. But I think the moment last night where he sort of just pulled it out of his shirt, out of his coat pocket to be like, actually, Chris, here it is, was a pretty badass move. The one thing I noted this early in the stream, that the one issue I had was that Bernie Sanders didn't have a soundbite ready. And I know that sucks for me to say, that I'm like, he needs a soundbite. but it really was something he missed, right? And I feel like he needs to think, or his team needs to think, Bernie has 1 minute. Explain how he's going to pay for it. Do the best you can. Of course there's going to be simplifications. Of course there's going to be some generalizations. But give, what's your 1 minute pitch? You can do that. And I think that was something Bernie missed tonight. That would have, nipped a lot of that all in the bud. Go Habs, yeah. I saw that with Philip DeFranco. I did see that. I don't watch Philip DeFranco all the time. People are saying apparently he used the Megazord analogy with regard to all the neoliberal candidates joining together to defeat Bernie. Yeah, but I do watch him from time to time. He's a pretty interesting guy, I think. I like some of his stuff. His style is different than mine, but he's I did see that. Yeah, Zachary makes a point that a lot of people don't vote because they've never felt the need to, and so they sort of get disenfranchised, and it creates a vicious cycle, and I do think that's part of it. And I think that Bernie's challenge, but Bernie's opportunity is, can he get those people to believe this time in something special? That we can elect Bernie Sanders and have a candidate that will fight for a $15 minimum wage and will fight for, policies that improve healthcare, and will fight for policies that improve access to education and childcare and taxing the rich. And I think that Bernie Sanders has the ability to sell that more than anybody else. CK says Bernie Krat since 2012. I mean, I've liked Bernie for a very long time myself. Obviously, I was a big supporter of Bernie Sanders back in 2015, 2016. At that time, I didn't have a YouTube channel, but I was doing media work and I was writing for left-wing publications here in Canada. And a lot of us were talking then about how Bernie Sanders is inspiring the Canadian left. And I think there was a question from somebody in the chat. I might have missed it. Even as I pause it, I still miss questions because we're getting so many. Where they say, what does the NDP need to learn from Bernie? And, policy to some degree. Like, for instance, the NDP needs to adopt Bernie Sanders' free university and debt cancellation policy. We need to adopt that. But it's not so much ideology, but like the style of politics that Bernie should be informing the Canadian left on. More brash a little bit. More acknowledging of class conflict. More acknowledging of it's us versus them. Like us being the regular folks, them being the elite. And we do that sometimes, but not enough. Not enough. Andrea Horwath and Jagmeet Singh, who are the leaders I'm most familiar with, because Jagmeet's the federal leader and Andrea's the leader here in Ontario, I think have both actually done a decent job over the past few months and years, but have not done enough to really sell this vision that, we are fighting for working people, and that means fighting against the economic elite. Daniel says, wow, I actually catch you live. Awesome. Great to see. Always happy to see that. I know a lot of people, depending on their schedules, can't watch the live streams, but it's always great to have people here when they can make it. GAF says, I'm a boomer for Sanders. It's great to see. Like, one weakness with Bernie is older voters, right? Like, that's going to be a challenge in the general election as well. We got to really hope that Bernie Sanders can find some way to speak to older voters. And I hope his team is working on that. Because if there's one concern, it's that old people, for whatever reason, just don't like Bernie Sanders. And I don't get it. I don't get it, but they don't like him. Dustin asks, and I'm probably want to go. We are about 2 hours in. It's about midnight here, and I have to get up in the morning to make some more videos on a lot of these things. But so I'm just gonna take a couple questions here. The NDP, well, Vaudrey, to a certain degree, the NDP ran on debt on the cancellation of student loan interest. Students would still get loans. And they would cancel portions of the debt in some cases, but that students would get loans still, but they would be interest free. It wasn't quite good enough. Dustin Bin says, what pushes Canadians to vote? What motivates them? Well, I think in general, people vote either because they want to stop something or because they want to make something happen. Or some people vote out of compulsion because, they just believe voting's important and they don't always necessarily know why, but they just vote. And I think I think people want something meaningful in their life. We have to offer that to them. And I think Bernie has the chance of doing that in a way that no other major American politician does. And I think in Canada, we sort of face a challenge here on the left because we do offer stuff people want. We offer dental care. We offer pharmacare. We offer child care. But then again, a lot of people are motivated to vote against the Conservatives, even if it means voting for an intermediary party that doesn't really offer health care or dental care or child care. At best, it might offer half-assed solutions on those, but more often than not, it offers nothing at all. So, vote for Daddy. Bernie says a politics of solidarity is needed. Bernie won tonight. Look, vote for Daddy. I think you're right. Absolutely. And Bernie is selling at least a version of a politics of solidarity. Bernie had a good night tonight. It wasn't his best debate, but when you're the front runner and you don't blow it and everyone else doesn't really come and take your crown, you won the debate. And that was a night tonight. Nadia says, Christo, your analysis is sharp. I've only found your channel recently, and now I look forward to your videos of our current political shit show scene. Look, I offer what I can. So guys, I got a comment here by old Bat to Cats. I'm a boomer and I love Bernie and my cat and my vape. No nanny Bloomberg for moi. Yeah, look, Bloomberg's not my favorite, certainly. Look, and I think, honestly, for all these people worried about, nanny state socialism, it's coming from the billionaire oligarch. Bernie Sanders isn't telling people they can't drink pop or eat chips or have, certain forms of safe recreational drugs, right? Let's be real, right? Bernie Sanders is the candidate of economic equality and personal liberty. And I think that's important. We have to let people know that. And honestly, I think pushing Bernie Sanders as being a champion of marijuana legalization could be crucial to getting out some young voters that don't always vote in those states that don't yet have it legal. I think that could be very helpful. So, this was great, guys. Usually with these, I try to go for a couple hours. It is midnight or so here. So, I'm going to be wrapping up this stream. I want to let you guys know of a few things. Again, one, thank you for the support on tonight's stream. For all those who joined the channel, we got some new members. We also have some people who were very generous with super chats. So thank you so much for that. Your support for the channel really matters. If you want to support the channel another way, you could do so on Patreon. But at the end of the day, I understand people have a lot of things tugging at them. The biggest thing you can do to support the channel in many ways is to just watch the videos. When you watch my videos, it helps them be seen by more people. And the way YouTube works is that when you click on a video and you watch it for most or all of the way through, YouTube's like, that's a good video. I'm going to show it to more people. So you guys watching my content and liking it and sharing it and engaging with it has been the reason why the channel has started to grow so much so quickly over the past 6 or 7 weeks, where I've basically gone from, 9,000 subscribers to 16,000 almost in about a month and a half. And that's because people have started to engage more. I do these live streams after every debate, and like major event like that normally, or at least I try to, and every Wednesday night at 8 p.m., including tomorrow night. I'll be streaming tomorrow night as well. I'll be doing a weekly live stream where we cover sort of what's happened across the week in the U.S., in Canada, maybe abroad if you guys have questions about that as well. And that's where we'll be going to be talking about there. What else? Also with the streams, people often ask me, because of algorithmic reasons from all that I've read, YouTube loves when you stream, but often punishes you when you leave your stream videos up because they don't get clicked as much and they don't get watched for a very long percentage of the stream. So I don't delete them, but I do unlist them. So if you ever want to see the stream, you can often, if you come here, you can often send me a note on social media, or if you're one of my patrons or whatnot, you can send me a note to ask me for a link. Often you'll find the links on social media as well. If you missed the stream, you're welcome to watch it later, but it's just I unlist it because YouTube doesn't punish it algorithmically if I unlist it. So that's what I bring in. So for those who are new here, again, I thank you so much for stopping by. And for those who have been here for a long time, thanks for sticking with me. I will see you guys tomorrow night for a stream, and I'll probably have at least 1 or 2 videos up tomorrow throughout the day as well. So guys, have a great one, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks.